Self-focus is the foundation of transformation because every lasting change begins from the inside out, never the outside in. When you turn your attention inward, you start to see the habits, thoughts, and emotional patterns that shape your daily life, and this awareness becomes the first spark of growth. It's impossible to shift your direction until you consciously understand what has been guiding your steps. And that self-awareness is born only when you intentionally choose to observe yourself with honesty rather than judgment. The moment you recognize where your energy has been scattered, you begin to reclaim the power you've unconsciously given away. As you focus on yourself, you start to realize how much of your time has been spent reacting to circumstances instead of creating them. You begin to see where you've allowed external opinions to influence your decisions, and this clarity exposes the areas where you've been small out of habit, not necessity. Transformation requires acknowledging these internal truths because you can't change what you continue to avoid. With every layer of self-awareness you uncover, you become more capable of directing your life instead of drifting through it. Focusing inward teaches you to identify the beliefs that either propel you forward or hold you back. Some of these beliefs have lived within you for years, quietly shaping your choices, and when you finally bring them into the light, you gain the power to rewrite them. Self-focus gives you the courage to question the assumptions you've carried for too long, the doubts that whisper in your ear, and the fears that convince you to settle for less than what you're capable of achieving. Through this inner examination, you begin to understand that your life is not limited by what you lack, but by what you refuse to confront. The process of transformation deepens when you start evaluating your habits with the same level of intentionality. Habits are the building blocks of your identity, and they either reinforce your goals or weaken them. Self-focus pushes you to ask the difficult questions. Why do you procrastinate? Why do you accept less effort than you expect from yourself? Why do you allow old routines to dominate your days? These questions are uncomfortable, but they open the door to the kind of growth that changes the trajectory of your life. Once you see the truth, you can begin redefining what your days should look like. As your focus sharpens, you become more aware of the environments that influence your behavior. You notice which people lift your energy and which ones drain it, which places stimulate growth and which ones reinforce stagnation. Self-focus helps you recognize that your environment is not just where you live, it's what you allow into your mind, your conversations, and your daily routines. When you take responsibility for curating the spaces around you, you start protecting your growth with the same intensity you once protected your comfort. With consistent self-focus, you start to see progress not as a distant event, but as a daily practice. Instead of waiting for motivation or for life to shift in your favor, you begin making subtle but powerful adjustments in how you think, how you speak, and how you move. These small changes compound over time, turning into momentum that pushes you forward even on days when you feel tired or uncertain. Transformation doesn't happen in sudden leaps. It happens in quiet, consistent steps that no one else sees. As you deepen your commitment to inner work, you discover strengths you didn't realize you had. You find resilience in places you once saw weakness, and you uncover solutions within problems that previously felt overwhelming. Self-focus opens your eyes to your own potential, helping you recognize that you are far more capable than your old beliefs suggested. With each breakthrough, your confidence grows, not because of external validation, but because you've witnessed your own progress. Focusing on yourself also strengthens your emotional clarity. You start recognizing the triggers that steal your peace, the patterns that repeat in your relationships, and the emotional reactions that once controlled you. Instead of letting your emotions dictate your actions, you learn to guide them with intention. This emotional maturity becomes a powerful tool because it gives you the ability to respond with wisdom rather than impulse, allowing you to shape outcomes rather than be shaped by them. As you continue this journey, you become more disciplined, not because someone demands it from you, but because you understand the cost of ignoring your own potential. Discipline stops feeling like punishment and becomes a language of self-respect. You begin making choices aligned with your future rather than your feelings, and this shift marks a turning point in your personal evolution. The more you honor your commitment to yourself, the more unstoppable your growth becomes. With time, self-focus transforms from a practice into a lifestyle. It becomes the lens through which you evaluate your goals, your relationships, your priorities, and your identity. You start pursuing alignment instead of approval, purpose instead of distraction, growth instead of comparison. And as you continue investing in your own development, you begin to see that every step, every lesson, and every breakthrough started with the same decision to turn inward, to take responsibility, and to rise from within without waiting for permission or validation. Success is built through private discipline because the real foundation of achievement is laid in the moments no one else sees. It's easy to appear committed when the world is watching, but the true test of character happens in the quiet hours when you face the choice between what feels good now and what will matter later. Private discipline is the unseen engine that drives visible results, and without it, ambition becomes nothing more than a wish. When you learn to honor your commitments in silence, you begin to construct a version of yourself that is grounded, consistent, and capable of sustaining long-term success. Private discipline teaches you the value of doing the work without applause. It forces you to confront your own patterns and decide whether you want temporary comfort or lasting growth. In these private moments, there is no one to impress, no audience to motivate you, and no external reward to chase. There is only you, your standards, your responsibility, and your willingness to follow through. This solitude reveals who you truly are because it strips away the excuses and exposes the intentions behind your actions. As you practice discipline in private, you begin to realize how deeply your habits shape your identity. You notice the small choices that once felt insignificant, but were actually steering your future. You begin building consistency in the way you plan, the way you think, and the way you follow through. Over time, these quiet decisions reshape your character, and your character becomes the foundation that supports your goals. Private discipline creates internal strength long before external success becomes visible. The work you do when no one is watching also develops a kind of resilience that public motivation can never give you. Without the pressure of an audience, you learn to push through resistance from a deeper place, your purpose. You cultivate patience, endurance, and determination in an environment free from validation. This builds a mental toughness that carries you through setbacks because you have trained yourself to act based on commitment rather than circumstance. You start understanding that progress isn't always loud and growth isn't always glamorous. As your discipline deepens, you gain a clearer understanding of your values and goals. You start noticing which activities align with your purpose and which ones distract you from it. You begin setting boundaries with your time, your energy, and your focus. These boundaries become easier to maintain because they aren't built on external pressure, they're built on internal alignment. When your actions match your intentions behind closed doors, success becomes a natural extension of who you are, not something you have to chase. Working in private allows you to test your systems, refine your strategies, and adjust your approach without the noise of opinions. You gain the freedom to experiment, fail, learn, and improve without judgment. This environment of self-directed growth gives you the courage to keep going, even when progress feels slow. You start trusting yourself more because you see firsthand how consistent effort accumulates into noticeable change. Confidence grows not from praise, but from proof. Proof you create through your own discipline. Private discipline also strengthens your relationship with accountability. You begin holding yourself to a higher standard because you understand that no amount of external pressure can replace self-respect. You learn to measure your days not by how much attention you receive, but by how much progress you made toward your goals. This internal accountability becomes your greatest advantage because it keeps you anchored when distractions pull at your attention and tempt you to drift from your path. Through consistent private effort, you start developing a level of mastery in your craft, your mindset, or your habits that sets you apart from others. While most people rely on motivation or comparison, you rely on structure, intention, and routine. You begin stacking small wins every day, and those wins compound over time into a reputation for excellence. By the time people notice your success, the real victory has already happened in the long hours you spent sharpening your skills and strengthening your discipline. One of the most transformative effects of private discipline is the confidence you gain from knowing you can trust yourself. You no longer depend on inspiration or perfect conditions to take action. You become the kind of person who follows through, who honors their commitments, who shows up consistently, regardless of how you feel. This self-trust becomes a powerful force because it allows you to dream bigger, aim higher, and pursue goals that once felt out of reach. You start believing in your own capacity for greatness because you built it through action. In the end, success becomes an extension of your daily habits, not a sudden event. The work you do in silence creates the momentum that eventually becomes visible to the world. It is in the private hours, the disciplined routines, and the quiet sacrifices that the seeds of achievement are planted and nurtured. Private discipline turns intention into reality, potential into progress, and dreams into something you can touch, see, and live. Comparison is the enemy of clarity because it blinds you to your own path and shifts your focus towards someone else's journey instead of your own. The moment you start measuring your progress against another person's timeline, you lose sight of what makes your goals, your pace, and your purpose unique. Comparison forces you to view your life through a distorted lens, one that magnifies someone else's strength while minimizing your own potential. It creates confusion where there should be direction and doubt where there should be confidence. When you compare yourself to others, you disconnect from your true identity. You begin to question your abilities, your decisions, and your progress based on an image that was never meant to define you. This constant comparison makes you overlook the growth you've already achieved because your attention becomes fixated on what you think you lack. Instead of recognizing your own evolution, you become consumed with what you perceive others have accomplished, creating a cycle of insecurity that holds your mind hostage. Comparison also drains your energy in ways you often don't notice. You start spending mental, emotional, and even physical energy trying to match someone else's results, rather than investing that energy into your own development. This distraction steals the focus you need to build discipline, momentum, and consistency in your own life. The more you look outward, the more your inner clarity fades, making it difficult to identify what truly matters to you. Over time, this habit becomes a barrier between where you are and where you want to go. As you fall deeper into comparison, you begin prioritizing the wrong things. You start valuing external validation more than personal progress. You chase outcomes that aren't aligned with your purpose simply because you see others achieving them. You make decisions based on trends, pressure, or fear of missing out instead of being guided by your own vision. This misalignment creates internal conflict, leaving you feeling lost even when it appears you're moving forward. In reality, you're drifting away from your own direction. Comparison robs you of the joy and gratitude that come from acknowledging your own growth. When you constantly look at someone else's story, you ignore the victories, big and small, that shape your personal journey. You miss the lessons that come from your own process because you're too busy observing someone else's results. This robs your progress of its meaning and makes you feel like your efforts are never enough, even when you're moving in the right direction. Gratitude fades, and with it, so does the clarity needed to keep going. As you compare, you forget that every person's journey is shaped by different beginnings, challenges, opportunities, and experiences. No two paths are identical, yet comparison convinces you they should be. You start judging your timeline based on someone else's highlights, forgetting the unseen struggles and sacrifices that shape their progress. This illusion makes you impatient with your own timing and creates a pressure that pushes you away from growth and toward frustration. You lose the ability to trust your own pace because you're measuring it against a story that isn't yours. With every comparison you make, you weaken your self-belief. You start doubting your ability to succeed because you're constantly reminded of how far ahead someone else seems to be. This doubt becomes a heavy weight that slows your progress and clouds your judgment. Instead of seeing what you're capable of, you get stuck in a cycle of feeling behind, inadequate, or unprepared. This mental fog steals your clarity, making it harder to take bold steps or make decisions that support your long-term growth. Comparison also fuels unnecessary competition. Instead of striving to become the best version of yourself, you begin striving to outperform someone else. This kind of competition leads to stress, burnout, and emotional exhaustion because it's not fueled by purpose. It's fueled by insecurity. You chase after achievements that may look impressive but feel empty because they weren't born from your own calling. Success built on comparison never brings fulfillment, only temporary satisfaction that quickly fades. The moment you step away from comparison, you begin reconnecting with your own vision. You start hearing your inner voice more clearly and understanding what truly aligns with your strengths, values, and aspirations. Without the noise of others' achievements, you can finally evaluate your progress based on your own definition of success. This clarity allows you to build momentum from a place of authenticity rather than pressure, creating a path that feels meaningful and sustainable. As you release comparison, you reclaim your focus, energy, and direction. You begin to trust your timing, embrace your pace, and honor your unique journey. Clarity returns when you stop looking sideways and start looking inward, when you stop chasing someone else's story and start writing your own. Through this shift, you gain the freedom to grow without distraction and the confidence to move forward with purpose and certainty. You are your only competition because the real battle has never been against the people around you, but against the habits, doubts, and limitations within you. Every day you wake up with the opportunity to rise beyond the version of yourself that existed yesterday, and that is the only race that truly matters. When you adopt this mindset, you stop wasting energy on comparisons or external expectations and start focusing on becoming stronger, wiser, and more disciplined than you were before. The moment you shift your focus inward, your growth becomes limitless because you're no longer chasing someone else's path. You're honoring your own potential. Seeing yourself as your only competition teaches you to own your progress with honesty and courage. You begin recognizing the behaviors that hold you back, the excuses that keep you stagnant, and the fears that limit your decisions. Instead of directing your attention toward what others are doing, you start evaluating your own patterns and asking whether they align with the life you want to build. This internal audit becomes a powerful tool because it reveals the areas where change is necessary and gives you the clarity to take responsibility for your elevation. When you stop competing with others, you start competing with your mindset, your habits, and your resilience. You learn to challenge your old ways of thinking and question the stories you believed about your limitations. You begin pushing yourself to break cycles of procrastination, distraction, and self-doubt. This internal competition strengthens your character because it forces you to confront the parts of yourself that resist growth. Instead of avoiding discomfort, you lean into it, knowing that every challenge you overcome sharpens your potential. Viewing yourself as the only competitor allows you to embrace growth at your own pace. You stop rushing your journey or forcing timelines that aren't meant for you. You start appreciating the steady progress you make, even when it feels slow or unseen. This perspective gives you patience, which becomes a crucial part of your success. You learn to trust the process because you understand that your path is unique, and the only person you need to surpass is the person you were yesterday. This creates a deep sense of peace that fuels long-term consistency. As your focus turns inward, you become more intentional about your discipline. You start setting standards for yourself, not because you want to impress others, but because you expect more from who you are becoming. This shift changes the way you approach your days. You begin prioritizing habits that support your growth, choosing actions that reflect the future you're working toward, and eliminating distractions that pull you backward. Each small win builds momentum and reinforces the belief that you are capable of evolving into someone stronger and more focused. You also become more aware of your strengths and how to maximize them. When you're not distracted by someone else's success, you can identify the unique gifts and abilities that set you apart. This awareness helps you refine your craft, improve your skills, and elevate your performance in ways that feel authentic. You stop attempting to replicate what others are doing and instead lean into what makes you powerful. This creates a deeper connection to your purpose because you're no longer operating from imitation, but from intention. In this journey of self-competition, you begin to confront your weaknesses with honesty rather than shame. Instead of hiding from the areas where you fall short, you acknowledge them with the understanding that every weakness holds the potential to become a strength. This mindset allows you to grow with humility and determination. You start building systems to improve your consistency, address your gaps, and refine the parts of yourself that require more attention. This honest self-improvement becomes the engine that drives your transformation. Competing with yourself also protects your mental and emotional well-being. You stop allowing the pressure of others' achievements to dictate your worth or your pace. You learn to celebrate others without diminishing yourself because you understand that their success has nothing to do with your journey. This emotional freedom gives you the space to focus entirely on your growth, your evolution, and your mission. You become more grounded, more confident, and more aligned with who you are meant to be. As you continuously strive to outperform your past self, you begin to see success as a personal responsibility rather than a comparison game. You take ownership of your habits, your choices, and your progress. You recognize that no external competition can push you harder than the internal desire to evolve. This level of accountability strengthens your discipline and fuels your ambition, creating a cycle of growth that builds on itself day after day. With each step forward, you realize that the only person you ever needed to beat was the version of you who settled, hesitated, doubted, or resisted growth. You are your only competition because no one else can shape your future, control your discipline, or determine your potential. Every improvement you make becomes evidence that you are capable of more, and every step you take brings you closer to becoming the person you were always meant to be. Elevation requires intentional environments because growth doesn't happen in isolation or by accident. It happens when you deliberately place yourself in spaces that challenge you, stretch you, and support the vision you're trying to build. The environment you choose influences your mindset, your habits, and your standards, often more silently than you realize. When you surround yourself with people and places that push you to rise higher, your thinking expands, your discipline strengthens, and your potential becomes easier to reach. Elevation is never random. It is the result of choosing environments that align with the future you want, not the comfort of the present. As you become more conscious of the environments you occupy, you start recognizing how deeply they shape your identity. You notice how conversations, energy, and daily routines either elevate your ambition or drain your momentum. When you stay in spaces that tolerate mediocrity, you begin lowering your standards without even noticing it. But when you intentionally surround yourself with people who expect excellence from themselves, you naturally start expecting more from your own life. Elevation begins with awareness, and awareness grows when you pay attention to the environments that influence your thinking. Intentional environments also push you to adopt new habits that align with higher goals. When you spend time around disciplined people, their consistency inspires you to raise your own level of commitment. When you're surrounded by individuals with purpose, their clarity encourages you to sharpen your vision. The energy of an environment becomes the unseen force that shapes your daily decisions. Without realizing it, you begin to adapt to the rhythms, expectations, and standards around you. And when those standards are high, you naturally start elevating your own performance. These environments also expose you to possibilities you might not have considered before. When you're surrounded by people who are chasing growth and embracing discomfort, your belief in what is achievable begins to expand. You start to see that limitations were often created by staying in places that didn't challenge you. Exposure to new ideas, perspectives, and inspirations widens your understanding of what you are capable of. The more intentional the environment, the more it invites you to imagine a life beyond your current reality. Intentional environments also provide the support and accountability necessary for consistent growth. When you are in circles that hold you to a higher standard, you become more committed to following through on your goals. You find yourself driven not out of competition, but out of alignment with the values of the people around you. Accountability becomes a natural part of your development because you're connected to individuals who are not satisfied with excuses. They push you, not for their benefit, but because they see the potential within you that you may have forgotten. As you elevate your environment, you start to notice the difference between spaces that feed your growth and those that feed your comfort. Growth environments are not always easy. They challenge you, confront your excuses, and require you to stretch beyond what feels familiar. But they are the environments that build your resilience, shape your character, and strengthen your discipline. Comfort-based environments may feel safe, but they rarely produce transformation. By choosing intentionally, you choose whether you want comfort or elevation. Through intentional environments, you learn to value conversations that bring clarity rather than confusion. You become more selective with who you share your time, your energy, and your vision with. You seek out people who encourage growth-minded dialogue, who challenge your thinking with depth instead of superficiality. This shift in your social environment becomes a turning point because it redefines what you tolerate and what you pursue. You realize that elevation requires aligning your mind with voices that speak progress. These environments also help protect your focus. When you place yourself in spaces where distractions are minimized and purpose is prioritized, your ability to stay committed strengthens. You start cutting out environments that pull you backwards, spaces filled with negativity, complacency, or noise. You begin to understand that your surroundings must lift you, not limit you. This understanding teaches you to guard your atmosphere as carefully as you guard your time, because both determine the quality of your future. As you grow, you begin creating intentional environments for yourself, not just seeking them. You design routines, habits, and systems that support your elevation. You become intentional about what you read, what you listen to, and what you allow into your thoughts. Your internal environment begins to match the external one you've built, and this alignment becomes one of the greatest sources of strength in your journey. You're no longer shaped by accident, you're shaped by design. Over time, you start noticing that the more intentionally you curate your environment, the easier it becomes to elevate every area of your life. Your goals feel clearer, your discipline feels stronger, and your path feels more aligned. You understand that your environment is not just where you live, it's what you choose, what you absorb, and what you allow to influence your growth. When you choose environments that reflect the future you're striving for, you begin rising into the person you were always capable of becoming. Self-mastery unlocks unstoppable momentum because it gives you control over the very forces that shape your decisions, your habits, and your destiny. When you learn to master yourself, your emotions, your impulses, your reactions, your thoughts, you stop being driven by circumstance and start being guided by intention. This internal leadership becomes the engine that drives consistent progress. Instead of relying on bursts of motivation, you operate from a place of clarity and discipline, allowing you to move forward even when the path feels uncertain or challenging. Momentum grows naturally when your inner world is aligned with your goals. As you develop self-mastery, you begin to recognize the patterns that have been holding you back. You notice the tendencies that derail your focus, the triggers that spark emotional responses, and the impulses that lead you away from your purpose. With this awareness, you gain the power to interrupt those patterns and replace them with behaviors that support your growth. This shift doesn't happen overnight, but each time you choose discipline over distraction or purpose over impulse, you strengthen your ability to guide your own life rather than be controlled by automatic habits. Mastering yourself also means taking responsibility for your mindset. You learn to challenge the beliefs that create doubt, fear, or hesitation. Instead of letting negative thoughts control your actions, you develop the ability to redirect your thinking toward what empowers you. This mental discipline becomes one of your greatest assets because once you control your mind, you can control your decisions. And once you control your decisions, you can control your results. Over time, this mental recalibration fuels momentum that becomes difficult to stop. As your self-mastery deepens, your emotional resilience grows. You become less reactive and more intentional. You learn to navigate challenges without allowing frustration, anxiety, or uncertainty to derail your focus. Emotional mastery doesn't mean suppressing feelings. It means understanding them and responding from a place of strength rather than impulse. This gives you the stability needed to stay consistent through obstacles, and consistency is the foundation of momentum. When your emotions no longer dictate your actions, you gain the capacity to keep moving forward regardless of what life throws at you. Self-mastery also sharpens your discipline. It turns discipline from something external, something you try to force, into something internal, something that becomes part of who you are. You start doing what needs to be done, not because you feel like it, not because someone is watching, but because you've developed the identity of someone who follows through. This identity-based discipline creates a compounding effect. The more you follow through, the more confidence you gain, and the more confidence you gain, the stronger your momentum becomes. Through mastering yourself, you develop a clearer sense of purpose. You start understanding why you want what you want, and this clarity fuels your commitment. You become more focused on the long-term vision and less distracted by temporary temptations. Purpose becomes your internal compass, guiding your decisions and keeping you anchored during uncertainty. This alignment between your values and your actions removes the internal conflict that slows people down. When your direction is clear, your movement becomes faster and more powerful. Self-mastery also gives you the ability to create systems that support your growth. Instead of relying on willpower alone, you build routines and habits that automate your progress. You structure your days in ways that reflect your priorities, making it easier to stay consistent. These systems multiply your productivity and eliminate the friction that often stops people from taking action. Once you have systems, momentum becomes not just possible, but predictable. As you continue mastering yourself, you begin eliminating distractions with greater confidence. You become more protective of your focus, your peace, and your time. You stop giving energy to situations, people, or habits that slow your progress. This intentional pruning of your environment increases your speed and efficiency. With fewer obstacles in your path, your progress accelerates and the momentum you build starts to carry you forward in ways that feel almost effortless. Self-mastery teaches you persistence. You learn to stay committed even when the results are not yet visible. You understand that progress often happens beneath the surface before it becomes noticeable. This patience keeps you grounded when others might quit. Over time, this unwavering consistency creates a powerful upward trajectory that becomes difficult to interrupt. What once felt impossible becomes achievable because you didn't stop, didn't break, and didn't fold. As your mastery over yourself expands, you tap into a level of momentum that feels unstoppable. Not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you become stronger, clearer, more intentional, and more disciplined. You move with purpose, you act with confidence, and you stay aligned with the person you are becoming. The momentum you build from inner mastery becomes a force that carries you through challenges and propels you toward outcomes that once felt out of reach. Self-mastery unlocks unstoppable momentum because once you gain control over your inner world, the outer world no longer dictates your pace or direction. Momentum stops feeling like something you chase and starts becoming something you create from within. Every decision becomes clearer, every step more intentional, and every move aligned with who you are becoming rather than who you used to be. The moment you take ownership of your habits, your thoughts, and your emotional responses, you stop reacting to life and start directing it. This shift doesn't happen overnight, but it begins the instant you decide that discipline, clarity, and self-command matter more than comfort or chaos. As you continue building mastery over your impulses, you begin noticing how much easier it becomes to follow through on what you say you will do. The friction that used to slow you down loses its power because you learn to act based on commitment rather than mood. When your internal standards rise, your environments, relationships, and actions naturally adjust to match them. And the more aligned your life becomes with your values, the faster your forward motion grows. This momentum doesn't come from force. It comes from alignment. And that alignment is a direct result of self-mastery cultivated day after day. There is a unique strength that forms when you can trust yourself to handle discomfort, setbacks, and unpredictability without collapsing into old patterns. You begin developing an inner calm that allows you to move with confidence even when circumstances aren't perfect. Instead of waiting for motivation, you build systems that carry you through days when you don't feel inspired. Instead of relying on external validation, you create internal standards that push you to rise. With time, this discipline turns into rhythm, and that rhythm turns into momentum that becomes very hard to interrupt. As you strengthen this internal control, your identity begins to shift in subtle but powerful ways. You stop viewing yourself as someone trying to improve and start seeing yourself as someone designed for growth. That belief changes how you approach every challenge, every opportunity, and every moment of resistance. You stop negotiating with excuses and you start negotiating with your potential. This is where the real acceleration happens, because the strongest momentum is created when your self-image and your actions finally agree with each other. In this stage, your habits become the foundation of your future instead of the remnants of your past. The daily choices that once felt heavy become automatic. You wake up with intention instead of confusion, and you move through your day guided by a sense of purpose that doesn't need applause or recognition. Self-mastery turns your goals from hopes into inevitabilities because your lifestyle begins supporting what you say you want. And when your lifestyle aligns with your vision, momentum becomes the natural consequence. Momentum also compounds when you detach from shortcuts and embrace the long arc of mastery. You start understanding that slow, consistent progress beats fast, erratic action. Every small win reinforces the belief that you can trust yourself, and every act of discipline builds a deeper sense of internal power. Over time, you become less influenced by external noise and more committed to the silent work that produces real results. This internal quiet becomes a source of strength that enables you to move faster, farther, and with more conviction than ever before. As this inner growth continues, your external world begins to transform. The opportunities that didn't exist before begin to appear because you've elevated your capacity to handle them. People treat you differently because your energy communicates confidence, focus, and direction. You stop wasting time on distractions because your time becomes too valuable to trade for anything that doesn't support your purpose. This shift accelerates your progress even more because momentum always favors those who protect their focus and guard their energy. In gaining mastery over your inner narrative, you rewrite the limits you once believed were unbreakable. The doubts that used to slow you down become quieter. The fears that held you back lose their authority, and the insecurities that once dictated your choices begin dissolving. You start understanding that momentum isn't a gift given to the talented. It's a reward given to the disciplined. And with every day that you choose mastery over comfort, your momentum grows stronger, louder, and more undeniable. As this momentum builds, it begins influencing every area of your life, your health, your relationships, your finances, your purpose. You start operating from a higher standard without even thinking about it. You move with intention instead of hesitation. You speak with clarity instead of confusion. You choose what builds you rather than what drains you. And day by day, your life begins reflecting the power of someone who no longer allows their emotions, environment, or past to dictate their future. Ultimately, self-mastery creates a version of you that cannot be easily stopped, distracted, or discouraged. The momentum you build becomes self-sustaining because it's rooted in discipline, identity, and alignment, not pressure or perfection. And as you continue refining your inner world, the world around you will eventually have no choice but to rise to the level of the person you are becoming, fueled by a momentum that was built in silence, strengthened through discipline, and sustained by the power of self-mastery.